Welcome back. I was going through a particular script this week, one that came across my desk with a deceptively quiet title. What stopped me was not the betrayal is common, but the method of exit. The protagonist did not rage. He simply closed a door, and then he changed every lock in the building, his eternal diary. The night Cassandra told him she needed space, the apartment smelled like her perfume, and his ambition. Two things that had never quite learned to occupy the same room without competing. Nathan Hale registered the scent first. Sandalwood and white jasmine, the specific blend she ordered from a boutique in Montreal that cost more per ounce than most people paid for groceries. He had bought her the first bottle 3 years ago as a joke, as a jab at her old habit of buying department store fragrances and pretending they were something more. She had not laughed. She had unscrewed the cap, held it to her nose, and then looked at him with an expression he had spent years trying to name and never quite succeeded. He was standing in their kitchen, or rather the kitchen of the apartment he leased in his name, and furnished with money he had earned through 12-hour days and weekend conference calls, when she came through the door behind him. He had been assembling a late dinner, leftover pasta, a glass of wine he had been looking forward to since 2 in the afternoon. And the sound of her key in the lock had caused something small and automatic in his chest to loosen. Then he turned and saw her face. There is a specific quality to a human face in the moment before it delivers news it has rehearsed. A certain stillness around the jaw, a kind of deliberate vacancy in the eyes, was the sort of vacancy that is not emptiness, but rather a controlled blankness, a shield. Cassandra Walsh had always been beautiful. This was a fact as neutral and indisputable as a weather report, but in that moment her beauty had the quality of a stage set, immaculate and completely hollow. "Nathan," she said. He set down the fork. He noticed later, in the reconstruction that his mind performed involuntarily over the following days, that she had not removed her coat, or that detail would grow teeth. "Darius called," she said. Nathan said nothing. He reached for the wine glass instead, and took the sip he had been looking forward to since 2 in the afternoon. It tasted like very little. Darius Mercer. He had not heard that name spoken aloud in 14 months, not since the night Cassandra had mentioned, with studied casualness, that she had run into him at a gallery opening. As Nathan had filed the information in the back of his mind, in the way that men file information they do not want to examine too closely, not discarded, just placed in a drawer and pushed shut. Darius Mercer. The man who had occupied the 4 years of Cassandra's life before Nathan arrived. The man whose photographs had lived in a shoebox she kept on the high shelf of her closet. A shoebox she had never thrown away, and whose existence Nathan had chosen, deliberately and with what he now recognized as profound stupidity, to interpret as sentimental rather than active. "He's sick," Cassandra said. Her voice was controlled. It was the voice she used in client meetings, smooth and room temperature. "It's serious. He has nobody. His family they're not close. And he reached out to me because he remembered that I was always—" She stopped. She appeared to be selecting words with care, the way a person selects footing on uncertain ground. "He remembered," she started again, "that I was always the person he could call." Nathan turned the wine glass in his fingers. The stem was cool and thin, and he was aware, distantly, that he was applying slightly more pressure than necessary. "What are you asking me?" he said. She sat down at the kitchen table. He remained standing. This was not a deliberate power choice. He simply could not have articulated in that moment where his legs might take him if he moved. I want to be there for him," she said. "I need you to understand that. He is dying, Nathan. He is genuinely—" She pressed her lips together. He doesn't have long. Months, maybe. The diagnosis is… Another pause. I can't explain what it was like when I heard his voice. I can't make you understand what we had. You could try, Nathan said. She looked up at him with something that flickered close to guilt, and then settled back into that rehearsed blankness. I need some time, she said. I need to be able to go to him without feeling like I'm breaking something between us every time I walk out the door. She exhaled. I need space to process this. He had heard the phrase many times over the course of his 36 years. It had never once, in any context, meant what it claimed to mean. Space to process was not a request for geographical distance or temporal latitude. It was a request for the other person to stop having needs, to become convenient, and to exist at a volume that did not interfere. How much space? He asked. She looked at him with an expression that he recognized now as something she had been rehearsing for a while. Perhaps a week. Perhaps longer. It was the expression of a person who has already made a decision and is now in the process of administering it to someone else. Just room to breathe, she said. I'm not saying anything definitive. I just need to be able to focus on this without me, he said. Oh, she did not contradict him. He drank the rest of the wine. He set the glass down on the counter with exactly the same care he had used to pick it up. Then he looked at her for a long moment, and something happened in that moment, something that did not announce itself with violence or sound, but simply arrived like a shift in air pressure. Some final, irrevocable closing. All right, he said. She blinked. She had clearly been prepared for argument, negotiation, the elevated voice, and the wounded catalogue of everything he had done and given. He could see her recalibrating. All right, she said. You need space, he said. That's a reasonable thing to need. He turned back to the counter and picked up the fork he had set down. The pasta's ready if you want some. She stared at him. Nathan? I heard everything you said, he told her, without turning around. I'm not angry. I'm not going to make this into an argument. You need to go take care of someone you loved. I understand that. He plated the pasta with the methodical focus he brought to everything. Eat first or don't. It's up to you. She left 20 minutes later. She had eaten half the pasta in silence, and then carried her bowl to the sink, with the careful movements of a person navigating a space that has become unfamiliar. At the door, she paused. I'll call you, she said. Sure, he said. He heard her key in the lock. He heard the elevator down the hall arrive and take her. He stood in the kitchen for a while longer, listening to the specific silence of an apartment that now contained only one person who had, until very recently, believed it contained a future. Then he sat down at the table and ate his dinner. He would reconstruct the decision later, not as a moment of anger, because anger had nothing to do with it, but as a kind of slow, careful inventory. What he was a transactional attorney at a firm in the upper tier of a city that had no shortage of upper-tier firms. He was, specifically, a specialist in corporate restructuring. He understood, better than most people he knew, the mechanics of what happened when an entity became insolvent, the ordered process of liquidation, the identification of assets, the careful, legally mandated process of determining what belonged to whom. And he had spent 8 years practicing a form of law that was essentially the clinical science of ending things properly. And so he sat in the kitchen that night and he did not grieve. He inventoried. The apartment, his name on the lease, his deposit, his monthly payment, his furniture with one exception, the small oak writing desk in the second bedroom that Cassandra had brought from her previous place, and that she had never once used for writing. The car, his, purchased outright, Busa title in his name. The joint account, opened 14 months ago at her suggestion, seeded primarily with his contributions. Current balance just over $48,000, the accumulated remainder of two people's combined incomes after a year of shared expenses that had, he was now able to see with perfect clarity, been primarily his expenses. The weekend house in the Berkshires, this one required more careful thought. He had purchased it 18 months ago, and he had purchased it in both their names because she had stood in the kitchen of the broker's rental staging property and said with a kind of quiet radiance, "Nathan, this is the kind of place where you put both names on something." And he had looked at her and thought, yes, that is exactly what this is, and had proceeded accordingly. He sat with that one for a while. Then he opened his laptop and began to work. He was not a man given to obvious displays, and he had grown up watching his father conduct a decade-long collapse with maximum volume and minimum strategy, the business that went under, the marriage that went up in precisely the kind of operatic flames that guaranteed nothing useful was salvaged from either. He had learned early that emotion was the single most expensive indulgence available to a person in a difficult situation. It cost time. It cost clarity. Yet it cost the particular cold advantage that belonged exclusively to the person in the room who was not currently being moved. He had never used that lesson against Cassandra. He had been, by any honest accounting, a man who loved her genuinely, and with a specificity that he recognized sitting now in this kitchen had not been reciprocated at equivalent depth. He had loved the woman she was when she was not performing. He had loved her at 7 in the morning with cheap coffee and a bad attitude. Yet he had loved her in the parking structure of a hospital on a Tuesday in November when her mother's diagnosis came back and she had sat in the passenger seat of his car and made sounds that had no language in them. He had loved her through the specific, grinding work of building a life alongside another person, which bore almost no resemblance to anything depicted in the cultural artifacts through which people learned to expect love. She had loved the version of him that was useful to her, but he could see it now with a precision that was almost architectural. The timeline laid itself out with the orderly clarity of a deposition exhibit. The early years, when she had been uncertain about him, he had been newer then, a discovery, a quantity she was still assessing. The middle period, when he had become load-bearing, when his income had expanded and his professional reputation had solidified, and he had become without announcement, as the structural support around which her life had been quietly reorganized. And then the current period, the period he had apparently been in for some time without recognizing it, in which she had outgrown the uncertainty and settled into a kind of comfort that had very little to do with him specifically. He was not a discovery anymore. He was infrastructure. And Darius Mercer, dying in whatever apartment or hospital room, but represented something that infrastructure reliably could not compete with. He represented the version of her life she had chosen not to live. He represented a door left open, a question still technically unanswered, the specific gravity of unfinished things. Nathan understood this. He understood it the way he understood the mechanics of an adverse possession claim, not with feeling, but with the clean, dry comprehension of a man who had been trained to see the underlying structure of things. Yet what he also understood, sitting at his laptop at 11:45 on a Wednesday night, was that the same clarity that let him see her clearly now should have been applied to her considerably earlier. That was the only part that stung. Not the betrayal. Betrayal required a promise broken, and he was no longer certain she had ever made the promises he had understood them to be. What stung was his own failure of assessment, the one professional skill he possessed that he had, apparently, and chosen not to apply to his personal life. He had been reading their arrangement through the wrong legal framework. He had been operating under partnership law. Mutual benefit, shared liability, joint ownership of outcomes, when the actual structure, clearly legible in retrospect, was closer to a consulting agreement with automatic renewal and no exit penalties. He opened a new document. The first call he made the following morning was to a woman named Patricia Osei, who was a partner at his firm and who specialized in real estate and estate transactions with a focus on jointly owned property. He had referred her 3 clients in the last year. She owed him a thorough conversation. "Joint tenancy situation," he told her after the preliminary exchange. "Residential property, co-owned, no formal cohabitation agreement, no mortgage. One party wishes to effect a clean severance of ownership interest. What's the cleanest path?" There was a pause. Patricia was a careful woman who chose her words the way a jeweler chose a setting. "How clean?" she said. "Clean enough that there is no ambiguity afterward." "Is the other party aware?" "Not yet." "Are you the party looking to sever or the party being severed?" He considered the question. In his professional life, he had handled both sides of this particular dynamic. The entity seeking to liquidate cleanly, and the entity discovering, midway through what it had assumed was a going concern, showed that its counterpart had already begun the exit process. He had always believed, privately, that the former position was preferable. "I'm the one with the plan," he said. Patricia told him she would have something for him by end of day. He hung up and sat in his office for a moment, looking out at the city through floor-to-ceiling glass that caught the late October light in the particular way that reminded him, every year at this time, that winter was a structural reality and not a metaphor. Then he opened his calendar and began to move things. The call from Cassandra came at noon. He let it go to voicemail the first time, not from calculation but because he was in a client meeting and his phone was on silent. When he listened to the message during a break, her voice had a quality he had not heard before, carefully lightened, as if she had rehearsed a version of normal and was performing it into the recorder. "Just checking in," she said. "I hope the morning was good. I'm at his place. It's intense. But I wanted to hear your voice." A pause. "Call me back when you get a chance." He noticed the order of that message. She wanted to hear his voice. She had gone to the dying man's apartment first, and then from that context, she wanted to hear his voice. He was the voice she called from Darius Mercer's living room. He was the stability she reached for after the intensity of whatever she was doing there. Infrastructure, he thought. He called her back at 7 that evening from the kitchen of the apartment, which he had spent the prior 40 minutes cleaning with the focused energy of a man who needed his hands occupied. "Nathan," she said, and there was a warmth in it, a relief that he recognized. It was the warmth of returning to something reliable. "How is he?" Nathan asked. She exhaled. It's bad. The prognosis is really, the doctors are not giving him much runway. And he's on a medication protocol that makes him exhausted. He's lost weight." Her voice dipped. "He's scared. I can see it even when he's trying not to show it." "That's hard," Nathan said. "It is," she agreed. Then, "Thank you for being understanding about this. I know it's not ideal. I know it's—" "Cassandra," he said, not unkindly, but with a firmness that ended the sentence she was building. "Yeah," she said. "When you need space," he said, "you should take it. I don't think we need to discuss it further." Another pause. He could hear, in that silence, the recalibration happening again. She had expected him to be manageable. She had expected the warmth she felt from his voice to translate into pliability. He could almost see her adjusting, trying to locate the version of him that she could navigate. "I'll probably be there most of the week," she said carefully. "I'll be here," he said. "Or not. I have a few things to take care of." He did not elaborate. The few things began the following morning with a meeting with Patricia Osei, who arrived at his office with a manila folder, a flat white coffee from the place on the ground floor, and the particular composed efficiency that had made her a partner at 34. "Okay," she said, spreading documents across his conference table. "I pulled the deed on the Berkshire's property. Wow. You're recorded as joint tenants with right of survivorship, which means, as you know, the co-owner cannot unilaterally sever their interest in a way that eliminate the survivorship right without converting to a tenancy in common first," he said. "Right, which requires only one party's action, a unilateral severance. You file a deed transferring your own interest from yourself as joint tenant to yourself as tenant in common. The joint tenancy is severed. What you now each own a 50% undivided interest." She tapped the edge of the folder. "At which point you can partition." "Partition by sale," he said. "Preferred, unless she agrees to a buyout. But with a forced partition, a court would compel the sale." She paused. "This moves slowly if she contests it. Fast if she doesn't. Timeline either way? Uncontested buyout with her agreement. You could have a clean transfer in 6 to 8 weeks. Contested partition, 8 to 14 months? Depending on the docket." He looked at the documents. The property in question was a 1920s farmhouse on 11 acres, purchased for $480, currently appraised at just over $700,000 based on the regional market appreciation of the past 18 months. He had put in 100% of the purchase price. He had put in 100% of the renovation costs: the roof, the boiler, the kitchen, the second bathroom. What he had done this because she had stood in that house and used the word ours in a way that had felt, at the time, like a fact and not an aspiration. "What about the joint account?" he said. Patricia set down her coffee. "That's simpler. Legally, either party can withdraw any amount at any time. There's no procedural barrier." "I know," he said. "I'm asking about the cleanest way to document the process, so there's no dispute afterward about the source of the funds." She looked at him with the specific professional respect that passed between two attorneys when one of them recognizes that the other is building something careful and comprehensive. "You've been documenting contributions?" she asked. "I have 8 years of financial records," he said. "Salary documentation, contribution history, account statements. But I know to the dollar what came in from each side." "Then you draft a clear accounting. You execute the withdrawal with a contemporaneous memo, and you offer a settlement." "That's what I thought," he said. He sent no emails to Cassandra that day. He sent no messages. He did not reach out. At 9 that evening, she texted him. "Had a long day. Thinking of you." The kind of message that required nothing specific in return and was, he understood now, designed to maintain a connection at precisely the temperature she found convenient, warm enough to feel present, cool enough to demand nothing. He read it. He did not respond. She called 20 minutes later. "I sent you a message," she said when he answered. "I know," he said. A pause that had a slightly different quality than the previous pauses. Less recalibration, more uncertainty. "Are you okay?" she said. "I'm fine," he said. "Tired. I have a restructuring brief due end of week." "Right," she said. She sounded unexpectedly, slightly diminished. I didn't want you to feel ignored. I know I said space, but I don't want you to feel like I—" "Cassandra," he said again. The same firmness as before. "You don't need to manage my feelings. Go take care of what you're taking care of. I'll be here." There was a silence in which he heard her breathing and thought, and with the peripheral cold clarity that had been operating in him for 3 days now, that she had not anticipated this version of him. She had anticipated a version that was available and in pain. Available because it needed her to know it was in pain, and in pain in a way that confirmed her centrality. A person experiencing that kind of pain made contact. It sent the message at 9, and then when the message wasn't answered, and it waited with the specific anxious focus of someone who needed a response in order to confirm they still existed. He had not sent a message at 9. "Okay," she said softly. Good night then." "Good night," he said. He hung up and looked at the apartment, his apartment, and felt something that was not satisfaction exactly, and not grief exactly, but something that existed in the narrow space between them, a kind of cold clarity, and the same quality that entered a room the moment you opened a window on a morning in early November. He got up and made coffee. He had 4 hours of work left on the restructuring brief, and he intended to use all of them. The week proceeded. He spoke to Patricia twice more. He had a separate conversation with Marcus Webb, his closest colleague, and a man who had practiced employment and contracts law for 11 years, and who had, over the course of their friendship, had become the person Nathan most trusted to tell him when he was wrong. Nathan was rarely wrong in professional matters. Marcus found this, depending on the context, either admirable or deeply irritating. "Walk me through it again," Marcus said over lunch on Thursday. "She told you she needed space to tend to a dying ex. You said fine. And now what? You're executing some kind of quiet legal excavation." "I'm organizing my affairs," Nathan said. Nathan. I have jointly held assets that were acquired with a significant imbalance in contribution. I'm correcting that imbalance in a way that is legally orderly and will not be subject to dispute." Marcus put down his fork. "Does she know you're doing this?" "She knows I'm a transactional attorney," Nathan said. "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer that matters in a legal context," Nathan said. "She is not entitled to notice of my personal financial reorganization, and she is a co-owner of one piece of real property. She will be notified at the appropriate procedural step." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Marcus was a man who had been through his own divorce 5 years ago, an experience that had given him a particular lucid comprehension of the gap between legal correctness and human cost. "I'm not going to tell you you're wrong," Marcus said. "You're not wrong. I'm just noting that you're executing this with a level of precision that implies something more than financial housekeeping." "It is financial housekeeping," Nathan said. "I'm a very tidy person." Marcus picked his fork back up. "She's going to be blindsided." "People who take things for granted often are," Nathan said, "when inventory is taken." He received a call from Cassandra on Friday afternoon. It had been 6 days since their kitchen conversation, and in that time she had sent 9 text messages of varying lengths, called 4 times, and, according to the building's front desk, which he had thought to ask because he was a thorough man, stopped by the apartment building twice without buzzing up. In that time, he had responded to 4 of her messages with brief, neutral acknowledgments. He had taken 1 call and conducted it with the pleasant, affectless warmth of a man who was genuinely busy and genuinely fine. Yet the call on Friday afternoon was different. "I think I need to come home," she said. She had developed a habit, he noticed, of calling it home, a word that he had previously found meaningful and now recognized as another piece of the convenience architecture she had built around him. "You can always come here," he said. "You have a key." "Nathan, She stopped. "Can we talk tonight? Really talk?" "I have the restructuring brief," he said. "I'll be working late." "Tomorrow." Then?" "I have a call with a client in London at 9 and a morning meeting after. I can probably do something in the afternoon." There was a silence in which he could feel her trying to locate what had changed. She was a perceptive woman, which he had always found one of her more interesting qualities. She was trying, now, to apply that perception to the specific temperature of him, and finding that the instrument was giving her readings she did not know how to interpret. "Are you angry at me?" she said. "No," he said. And this was true. Anger would have required ongoing investment. "You seem—" she searched for the word. "Distant." "I'm in the middle of a complex brief," he said. "I'm focused." "On work," she said. The inflection was almost a question, almost an accusation. "On work," he confirmed pleasantly. Saturday she arrived at 2 in the afternoon, wearing the same coat she had been wearing the night of the kitchen conversation. And he noted this with the automatic registering of a man for whom observational precision had become second nature. She came in and set her bag down, and looked at the apartment with the slightly heightened attention of a person who has been away from a space and is searching it for change. He had cleaned it Thursday. Beyond that, he had changed nothing. "You look good," she said. She sounded slightly uncertain about this, as if his looking good carried information she had not expected. Sit down," he said. "I'll make coffee." She sat at the kitchen table, in the same chair she had sat in the night she told him about Darius, and watched him move around the kitchen with the particular focused efficiency he brought to physical tasks. He made the coffee the way she liked it. She had always been particular about the ratio, 2.5 measures to every 6 ounces of water, and set it in front of her, and then sat across from her. "Talk," he said. And she wrapped both hands around the mug. He had noted, over the years, that she did this when she was managing a level of internal discomfort, the specific gesture of a person who needed something grounding. "It's been a hard week," she said. "Darius it's a lot. Emotionally, physically, for him. I've been there most days." She paused. "I feel guilty. About being away from you. About asking you for this." "You don't need to feel guilty," he said. She looked up at him. "You keep saying things like that, and I can't tell if you mean them." "I mean them precisely," he said. "Nathan," she said. "What's happening?" He looked at her. He looked at the face he had loved for 3 years. The specific way the light caught the right side of her jaw, the particular quality of her attention when she was genuinely uncertain. He looked at it with the same clean, dry comprehension he would bring to a term sheet. "Nothing is happening," he said. "You told me you needed space, and I gave you space. You told me you needed to focus on something important. I supported that. I don't know what you expected the aftermath of that to look like, but this is what it looks like." She was quiet. Her hands tightened slightly around the mug. "I expected you to be here," she said. "I expected—" She stopped. "You expected me to be waiting," he said. The word landed in the room with no particular violence, just placed there clearly. "I expected us to be okay," she said. We are okay," he said. "You asked for something. I provided it. That's a functional exchange." She stared at him. "A functional exchange?" She set the mug down. "Nathan, we're not a business transaction." He let a moment pass. Just long enough. "No," he said. "We're not." She came back twice more in the following 2 weeks. The first time, she arrived unannounced on a Tuesday evening and found him on the phone, finishing a client call, and moving through the apartment with the absent efficiency of a man conducting his actual life. She waited. He finished the call, and made dinner, and they talked about things that were not the central thing, which he knew she found profoundly disorienting, because she had always been a woman who preferred to name things, and he had always been a man who preferred to understand them before naming them. The second time, She brought wine. An expensive one, then. Mans, the kind she chose when she was trying to create a specific atmosphere. She set it on the counter, and he opened it, and poured 2 glasses, and they sat in the living room he had furnished, the sofa he had chosen, the lamp in the corner that he had driven to 3 different stores to find. And she told him that Darius had stabilized slightly, that the new medication protocol was having some effect, that the worst-case timeline had been revised. He listened, and he asked appropriate questions. He held his wine glass and looked at her and thought, "There it is." "I'm glad he's doing better," he said. "Are you?" she said. The question had an edge in it, not a cruel edge, something more exposed than that, something that wanted a specific answer. "Yes," he said. "I don't wish suffering on anyone." She looked at him for a long time. "I've been thinking about us," she said. "I know," he said. "I think I made a mistake in how I framed things. I think I was clumsy. She pressed her lips together. "I think I took you for granted." He said nothing. "I've been thinking about that a lot," she said. "About what you represent to me, about what we've built. And I think when Darius called, I panicked. And in my panic, I made it sound like I was choosing him over you, when that's not—" "Cassandra," he said. She stopped. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Iat. And I need you to listen to all of it before you respond." She nodded. She had leaned slightly forward, which he recognized as the posture of a person who expects what is coming to require navigation and is already calculating the route. He told her about the apartment lease. He told her he had been in contact with the building management, and that when the current lease term ended in 3 months, he would be renewing in his name only. She went very still. He told her about the joint account, and he told her that 2 weeks ago he had executed a withdrawal of his documented contributions. He had produced the memo, the paper trail, the precise accounting, all of it, and that the remaining balance, which represented her contributions, remained in the account and was available to her. Her face had changed. It had lost the carefully maintained blankness and become something rawer. He told her about the Berkshires property. He told her that he had filed a unilateral deed severance, converting their joint tenancy to a tenancy in common, which under state law required no consent from the co-owner. He told her that he intended to buy out her 50% interest at fair market value, as established by an independent appraisal he had already commissioned. He told her the figure. $342,000, split evenly, her portion representing approximately $171,000, which he was prepared to transfer to an account of her designation. She was staring at him as if she had reached for something reliable in the dark and found nothing there. "I want to be clear," he said, "that everything I am describing is legally correct. You are not being cheated. You are not being treated unfairly. I am offering you fair market value for your interest in a property that I purchased entirely with my own funds, and I am doing so without hostility, without malice, and without any desire to cause you harm." She said his name. Just his name, in a voice that did not sound like the voice she used in client meetings. "You told me you needed space," he said. "I am organizing the space." She was quiet for what felt like a long time. Outside the window, the city continued its late evening business. A siren somewhere, the low percussion of traffic, a November wind pressing against the glass. As the lamp in the corner, the one he had driven to 3 stores to find, cast its specific warm light across the room. "This is because of Darius," she said. It was not quite an accusation. It was more like a conclusion reached through visible effort. "This is because of me," he said. "I conducted a review of my affairs, and found that I had organized them in a manner that did not reflect my actual situation. I'm correcting that. Your actual situation. She repeated the phrase as if testing its weight. Nathan, we have been together for 3 years. Yes, he said. You are dismantling 3 years as if they were a business partnership. He looked at her. He looked at the face he had loved and still loved. Probably. There was no clean switch for a thing like that. He was not so cold as to pretend otherwise. But loved now the way you could love a place you had left. With clarity and without the distortions that living inside something produced. You were the one who introduced the transactional framework, he said. You told me what you needed. I provided an assessment of what I needed in return. He paused. The space you asked for. I gave it. Here is what the space looks like from my side. She stood up. She walked to the window and stood there for a moment with her back to him, and he could see the line of her shoulders and the specific quality of a person who is containing something that very much wants to come out. I was going to come back, she said to the window. I know, he said. I was going to apologize. I was going to tell you that I got scared and I handled it badly. I was going to... Her voice had something in it now, something that was not quite tears but was in the adjacent territory. I was going to fix it. I know, he said again, and softer, and because even at this temperature he was not cruel. I believe you. She turned around. Her face had the quality of someone who has had something shown to them they cannot unsee. So this is over, she said. He looked at her for a long, honest moment. In that moment he was precisely himself. Not the performance of the cold, strategic man, not the performance of the available and in-pain man she had expected, but the actual man who had spent 3 years building something with genuine intent and had spent the last 3 weeks understanding that the thing he had built was structurally unsound because one of the 2 load-bearing walls had never actually been engaged. I think, he said, that what is over is the version of this that didn't work. She blinked. The version where I was infrastructure, he said, available, reliable, present at whatever volume was convenient. That version is over. Yes. And this version, she said. What is this version? He picked up his wine glass. A fair accounting, he said. She left. She left the wine. She left the key. She placed it on the counter with a precision that told him she had thought about this gesture, that it meant something to her, or that she wanted it to mean something to him, or both. And she left. He sat in the living room for a while after the door closed. And he was aware of the apartment around him in the way you become aware of a space when it reverts to containing only you. He was aware of the lamp's light, the sofa's particular familiar shape, the faint sound of the city through the sealed glass. He was 36 years old. He had loved a woman who had loved the convenience of him. He had built a life inside a framework that had been, from the beginning, asymmetrically weighted. And he had done all of this with his eyes open in every professional context, and closed in this personal one, which was the only genuinely embarrassing part. He could live with embarrassment. He had examined it, understood its source, and filed it correctly. He picked up his phone and called Patricia Osei. The appraisal came back, she said, without preamble, because she was a woman who understood the value of not requiring ceremony. 712. Your offer stands at half of that, minus your documented purchase and renovation contribution, which gives you a net fair market settlement to her of $64,000. That's correct, he said. I'll have the settlement offer prepared by Monday. Thank you, Patricia. Nathan, she said. A pause. Are you all right? He considered the question with the genuine attention it deserved. I'm organized, he said. She did not call for 4 days. But he noted the absence the way a building engineer notes the absence of a stress indicator. Not with feeling, but with precision. 4 days in which the phone was quiet from her direction. He spent those 4 days finishing the restructuring brief, attending 2 client dinners he had been postponing, running every morning at 6 along the river where the November light came in flat and gray and tasted like metal, which he found clarifying. He also, during those 4 days, had a conversation that he had been postponing for different reasons. The woman's name was Diane Sato. She was a litigation partner at a different firm, and she had been, for approximately the last 2 years, the person Nathan Hale had dinner with 4 or 5 times a year, on evenings, that meant nothing definitive and had never been examined closely by either party. She was 41 and had been divorced and was comfortable with ambiguity in a way that he had previously found convenient and now found more interesting than convenient. He called her on a Thursday. "Dinner?" he said. "What's the occasion?" she said. "I'm reorganizing," he said. "I thought I'd start with Thursday." There was a pause, and then she laughed. An actual laugh, not a performed one, the kind that surprised the person producing it slightly. 7 o'clock, she said. You pick the place. Somewhere with good lighting." "I know somewhere," he said. The call from Cassandra came on a Sunday. 10 in the morning, an hour he associated with weekend domesticity. The particular laziness of a shared Sunday, coffee, and the papers, and whatever small negotiations a couple conducted in the space of a morning with nowhere to be. He answered from the kitchen, but where he was making breakfast for one and listening to a jazz station that he had always preferred and she had always found depressing. "The settlement offer came," she said. "Yes," he said. "Nathan, $64,000. Her voice had a quality he had not heard before. Not anger, she was too controlled for raw anger, and he respected this about her even now. Something more concentrated. "I contributed to that property. I was there every weekend for 18 months. Cassandra," he said. "The documented financial contribution from your side was 0. The renovation decisions were joint, and I don't dispute that your time and input had value. The $64,000 represents an equitable assessment of that non-financial contribution, which my attorney and I calculated based on the average rate for interior design consultation and project management over an 18-month period at comparable regional rates." She was quiet. "Oh, you hired a forensic accountant," she said. "I hired a thorough attorney," he said. "There is a difference, though the outcome is similar." "This is—" She stopped. He could hear her breathing, the specific measured breath of a person keeping something in check. "This is not the Nathan I know." "Yes, it is," he said. "It's the Nathan who practices transactional law. You've just never been on the other side of the transaction before." The silence that followed had a texture, and it had the texture of a person standing at the edge of something they had assumed was solid ground, and discovering the ground had opinions about being stood on. "I want to talk to you," she said. "In person. I want to understand what happened." "I can do Tuesday," he said. "Afternoon." "Not here," she said. He understood she meant the apartment. "Somewhere neutral." "The cafe on Meridian," he said. 4 o'clock. He arrived 4 minutes early, because he arrived everywhere 4 minutes early. And he ordered coffee, a plain black coffee, none of the architectural beverages on the menu that had always struck him as the culinary equivalent of emotional avoidance, and sat at a table near the window where the November afternoon light came in at its flat, honest angle. She arrived exactly at 4. She was wearing the kind of composed professional outfit that communicated she had thought carefully about this meeting. Dark trousers, a coat he recognized, and her hair in the specific arrangement she used when she needed to feel armored. She sat down across from him and looked at him, and he looked back, and there was a moment in which two people who had shared 3 years of genuine proximity simply inhabited the same space without the mediation of the roles they had been playing. He noticed she looked tired. He noticed the particular shadow under her eyes that appeared when she was not sleeping well. He noticed that the composed professional armor was doing most of its work on her face, and that her hands, folded on the table in front of her, were doing slightly more than folded hands normally had to do. She ordered tea. They waited for it to arrive. "He proposed to me," she said. Nathan set down his coffee cup. "Darius," she said, "he proposed to me last week. He said that when you're looking at the end of something, you understand what you want." She looked at the table. He said he'd always wanted to marry me. He said he'd been a fool. He said—" She looked up. You can imagine what he said. Nathan could, in fact, imagine it quite well. He had a working knowledge of the specific performance that a dying man was capable of constructing around the word regret. He felt, for the man, something that was not quite sympathy and not quite contempt, but something in the vicinity of recognition. One adult with a clear strategic position, acknowledging another. What did you tell him?" Nathan said. "I told him I needed time," she said. He absorbed this. "Nathan," she said, and there was something raw in it now, something that had stopped trying to maintain the composed professional armor and was simply present. "I think I've made a terrible mistake." "Which one?" he said. She blinked. "The one where you chose not to choose," he said. "Or the one where you assumed the consequences were negotiable." She was quiet. "Well, I can tell you what I think happened," he said. "Professionally, it's a clean case. You had 2 assets. One was new and urgent, and had a finite availability, the dying man who represented unfinished business. One was reliable and stable and assumed to be permanent. Me. You chose to allocate your attention to the finite asset and assumed the permanent one would hold its value in your absence. This is a reasonably common error in portfolio management. Notice the assumption that permanence and availability are the same thing." She stared at him. "I am not a portfolio," she said. "No," he agreed. "You're a person who deserves honesty. And the honest thing I can tell you is that the version of me you could come back to is not available anymore." "Because you reorganized," she said. There was a note in it that was almost bitter, almost something, but he gave her credit. She kept it level. "Because I reorganized," he said, and the tea had arrived during their exchange. She had not touched it. He could see the steam rising from the cup, with the specific delicate consistency of heat dissipating into cool air, and he thought without particular drama that this was a reasonable image for most things. "I'm not going to marry him," she said. "I didn't ask," he said. "I'm saying it because I want you to know it's not about him. It was never about him, really. I think he was—" She stopped. "I think he showed up at a moment when I was afraid of how certain I had become about us, and I used him as a reason to create distance that I convinced myself I needed." She looked at him with a directness that cost her something visible. "I think I was scared of how much I'd built my life around yours, and I panicked, and I destroyed it to prove I could." He listened to this. He listened to it with the respect it deserved. It was, he recognized, a genuine and accurate piece of self-analysis. And he had always found genuine self-analysis one of the rarest and most valuable qualities in a person. "I believe you," he said. She reached across the table. Not all the way. She stopped halfway, her hand resting between them, and he looked at it, at the specific familiar shape of her hand, at the small scar on her index finger from a kitchen accident 2 years ago, at the particular way she held it, open, not demanding, just present. Is there nothing there? She said. Is it completely gone? He looked at her hand. He looked at her face. He felt something. It would be dishonest to claim otherwise, and he was, above all things, an honest man. He felt something that was not nothing, and he understood that this feeling was accurate and real, and that it did not change any of the structural facts. I don't think gone is the right word, he said. She waited. I think accurately assessed is the right word, he said. I loved you, and I think the version of you that was afraid and used that fear to test whether I'd break is someone I still love in the way you love a place you've left. Clearly and without the distortions of proximity. He looked at her hand, and then looked at her face, and then looked at his coffee cup, because there was a limit to the amount of direct eye contact this particular conversation could sustain without becoming something else. But I've done a full accounting. Jim, and what I found is that the structure I was living inside was not what I believed it to be. She withdrew her hand. And the structure you're building now, she said. Her voice was very level. Does it have room? It was not quite a question. He recognized it as the kind of statement that wants to be a question, but cannot afford to be one, because it has too much riding on the answer. He thought of Diane Sato's laugh, the specific, unperformed quality of it, as the comfort of a woman who had lived enough to be done performing. He thought of the apartment, his apartment, and the specific clarity of a space that was organized around only one person's actual life. He thought of the Berkshires' property, and the way the morning light came through the kitchen window in autumn, which was the specific light he had bought it for, that particular quality of November illumination through old glass. And he thought that whoever eventually sat in that kitchen would be doing so on his honest terms. I'm still organizing, he said. She nodded once. A small, contained nod that accepted what it accepted. She picked up her tea. She drank some of it. He drank his coffee. Outside, the November afternoon continued its business. Foot traffic, a bus, the particular restless energy of a city that does not believe in stillness. The 64,000, she said after a while. Yes, he said. I'll accept it, she said. I'll have my attorney review the terms and I'll accept it. That's the right call, he said. You're very calm, she said. You've been very calm through all of this. I'm not calm, he said. I'm clear. There's a difference. He finished his coffee and set the cup down and looked at her for what they both understood would be close to the last time in this particular configuration. Two people still technically in the orbit of each other, at the gravity not yet fully dissipated, but the trajectory established. Calm is the absence of feeling. Clear is feeling without it running the operation. She looked at him for a long moment. I did love you, she said. Properly. I want you to know that. I know it, he said. And I wasted it, she said. He said nothing. This was the one part he was genuinely unwilling to manage for her. She gathered her coat and stood. He remained seated, because he had not finished his coffee, and he was not a man who left things unfinished for the sake of staging. Nathan, she said, at the edge of the table, looking down at him with the expression of a person carrying something they have accepted they will be carrying for some time. He looked up at her. I hope whoever it is, she said, I hope she knows what she has. He held her gaze. I intend to make sure of it, he said. She left, and he watched her cross the cafe and push through the glass door and step out into the November afternoon, which received her the same way it received everyone. Indifferently, completely, without ceremony. He sat for a few minutes longer. He drank the rest of his coffee. He paid the check. He noted with the dispassionate registration of a man who has learned to observe himself without distortion that he felt the weight of it, no? Not grief, but the specific gravity of a real thing that had run its course, a building you had spent time in, now being properly vacated. He stood up. He put on his coat. He walked to the door, pushed through it, and stepped out into the same November afternoon that had taken her, which was gray and cold and honest and smelled like exhaust and dried leaves and the river 4 blocks east. His phone buzzed. Diane Sato. Changed my mind about the restaurant. I know somewhere better. What can you do, 7:30? He read the message. He considered the particular quality of a woman who changed her mind about restaurants because she had somewhere better in mind, and who communicated this with the direct confidence of a person who did not require the other party's pre-approval before having an idea. He typed, 7:30 works. Send the address. He put the phone in his pocket and walked. The settlement was signed 6 weeks later. Cassandra's attorney, a compact, a sufficient woman named Helene, who worked out of an office 2 blocks from the cafe, had reviewed the terms, proposed 3 minor modifications, and accepted the final figure. Nathan had spent 40 minutes on a Monday afternoon on a call in which Helene asked him 3 substantive questions about the appraisal methodology, and he answered all 3 with precise, courteous thoroughness. And the thing was done. $64,000. $200 transferred at 9:17 on a Tuesday morning. He sent no accompanying message. There was nothing to say that the transfer did not say more clearly. The document was the statement. The Berkshire's property went on the market the following March. He had spent 2 weeks in February driving up on weekends to prepare it. Not staging for sentiment, but the clean, professional preparation of a property for optimal sale. What he removed from it, the accumulated debris of a shared life. A painting she had hung in the bedroom, a set of ceramic bowls she had found at a local market and installed in the kitchen with the specific, satisfied air of a person making something theirs. He boxed these items with the neutral efficiency of a man clearing the set after a production has closed. He left them with a shipping service with instructions to forward them to her current address, which he had obtained from Helene. But he received no acknowledgement. He had not expected one. The property sold in 11 days, above asking, to a couple from New York who were looking for exactly the kind of old farmhouse with November light coming through original kitchen glass that Nathan had also once been looking for. He thought of them briefly. The couple, the farmhouse, the kitchen, the light. And then thought of them no more, because they were someone else's story now. And his accountant calculated the net position. The sale, combined with the documentation of his full contribution to purchase and renovation, resulted in a personal financial recovery substantially better than the market might have suggested. He had not organized his affairs to profit. He had organized them to be accurate. The accuracy happened to result in a clean and favorable outcome. This was generally what accuracy produced, in his experience, that when applied before the situation became irrecoverable, the month of Darius Mercer's stabilization became 2 months, and then, according to the single mutual acquaintance who communicated this to Nathan in passing, with the slightly uncomfortable air of a person uncertain whether the information is welcome, Darius's stabilization became more complicated again. The medication protocol required adjustment. The timeline reverted toward its original prognosis. As Nathan received this information on a Tuesday over lunch, he said, "That's genuinely difficult. I hope he has good support." And he meant it. He was not a man who performed sentiment, but he was not a man who wished illness on anyone. And both things were true simultaneously, without contradiction. He thought of Cassandra in Darius Mercer's apartment. He thought of the specific emotional texture of that situation. The dying man, the unfinished love, the proposal she had not accepted, at the loss she was now managing on multiple simultaneous axes. He thought of what it cost to be the person who stayed in that room every day and watched someone leave slowly. He did not reach out. She would have her hands full. She would be tending to the thing she had chosen to tend, and she would be managing the other loss alongside it. The loss of the infrastructure she had believed was permanent, which had turned out, like most things assumed to be permanent without examination, to have been contingent all along. He was not, in the arithmetic of that situation, available. He was not the stable structure to return to between difficult days. He had reorganized the space so that returning was no longer the option it had been. This was not cruelty. He had thought about it enough to be certain of this. It was accuracy. It was the specific, necessary, sometimes expensive correction that resulted from doing an honest accounting and acting on what the numbers showed. 6 months after the kitchen conversation, Nathan Hale was sitting in his apartment on a Saturday morning. His apartment, clean and organized around exactly one person's actual life, drinking coffee and reading briefs in the particular focused quiet of a Saturday that had not been negotiated with another person's preferences and therefore felt exactly like what it was. His phone was on the table. It produced, intermittently, the small sounds of a life in motion. A work email. A text from Marcus about a basketball game that evening. A message from Diane Sato containing a photograph of a menu and the text, "Thoughts? Dinner next week?" And he attended to each one with the unhurried focus of a man who had organized his time to match his actual priorities. The apartment smelled like coffee, and the faint winter morning cold that came through the window he kept cracked for air. No sandalwood, no white jasmine, no white. As the specific absence of someone else's particular and insistent signature on the space around him, which he had not realized until it was gone, had been a form of quiet pressure. He picked up the phone and looked at Diane's message. He looked at the menu photograph. A good restaurant, somewhere she'd clearly been thinking about, the kind of place that indicated she had opinions and acted on them without requiring consensus first. He felt the specific, unhurried warmth of genuine interest. Thus not the large operatic architecture of need and longing and the gravitational pull of a person who had become load-bearing. Something quieter. Something that sat in the room at a volume that did not require management. He typed, "Thursday, let's do it." He set the phone back on the table. He picked up his brief. He read 3 pages with the clean concentration of a man who knew where everything was. Outside, the city was doing its December Saturday business. Foot traffic and cold, and the specific low-angle light of a season that was honest about its nature. He had a case on Tuesday, a mid-size company in a restructuring situation, 2 competing creditors, a complex question of asset priority that would require 6 hours of careful analytical work before he could advise with confidence. He had a call with Patricia Osei on Monday about a new matter. Yet he had dinner Thursday with a woman who changed her mind about restaurants because she had somewhere better in mind. He was, by any accurate accounting, organized. He turned the page of the brief. He drank his coffee. Outside the window, the December light continued its flat, clear, honest work on the city, which did not require it to be anything other than what it was. His phone produced one more sound. He glanced at it without urgency. An email notification. Not a name he was tracking, and not a situation he was managing, not a thread requiring response. He turned back to the brief. The page was waiting. The work was there, clean and demanding, and his. organized around nothing but the actual requirements of the actual situation. He read,